Good afternoon, everybody. It's Steve of Real Progressives. I'm going to take a trip down memory lane. I'm going to talk to you all about some of the basics today to try and root out some of the misinformation that we continually have to repeat, and with good reason. This is stuff that makes people, they ask questions. It violates the very, very things that they believe hold dear in their hearts. Many of us have fought these battles for many, many, many moons. And you go back through as the former, where you don't understand economics and you're just going along with what the party tells you, and you trudge in place and you say the same things that everybody else says, and you never understand why nothing changes. So, we all said those things. All of us have said those things at some point or another. And it's only been with incredible amounts of effort and focus that we've managed to get out of the way and be able to break free from whatever the demagogues at the top of each of these parties, be it the main parties or even alternative parties. We've been able to break free of their party politics and just tell you the truth about how progressive economics is. Some of these things, I think it's really difficult because when you pin someone down and you ask them questions, they get very, very angry because they don't know the answers. They genuinely don't. And telling them that they don't know the answers to them feels somewhat condescending. And they really get upset because, quite frankly, once you call their bluff, they're left flailing about and everybody wants to react. Everybody wants to fight back. Most people don't just say, well, teach me, because they don't trust you. Maybe they don't know you. Maybe they have no idea what you've done or what you know or what steps you've taken to try to learn. And that's a fair thing, because I don't just take everybody's word for granted. I go and I do research. If somebody tells me something that flies against something that I've always believed, I'll listen, but I go ahead and I do some research. If I know that it's wrong, I'll say it's wrong, right? But politics is far more like religion than any of us give it credit for. And, when I talk to Green Party people and I try and tell them, guys, you've got a great platform, but you've got a horrific economic stance based on this American Monetary Institute. It's founded in conspiracies and gibberish. They say, well, you're bashing the Green Party. And I'm saying, I've actually taken time to learn more about your party than you have. And I'm telling you, in order for them to be truly successful, and it would be great if the Green Party could be successful based on this tremendous platform that they have overall. Much of what they stand for is absolutely fantastic. But there's some underlying truths that we've taken the time to research that are just non-starters. They're just bad economics. They're made by people that probably meant well, but they don't understand. So people reflexively react and they say things back. Don't bash the Green Party. Don't this. And it's like, guys, for you to be successful, we need to work with you to get this economic illiteracy out of your platform and embrace the stuff that will enable all these wonderful things you stand for. Same goes with Democrats. You talk to Democrats and they're like, well, if the party leaders didn't say what you're saying, well, I'm certainly not going to say it. And then they hunker down and they're like, I hear what you're saying, you over there, but hold on, we've got to huddle with our Democratic friends and we've got to ask them what they think. We got to huddle with our Green Party friends and ask them what they think, right? It doesn't matter if you're telling them that water is wet. They have to huddle with their own and say, what do you think? Do you think that? I don't think that. He's a cult leader or something. And that's what happens. They huddle in their little echo chamber. And if everybody doesn't agree, if the leaders don't tell them that this is the way it is, they won't listen to you. They will not listen to you because the only truth that they understand comes from their party's leadership. This is a very big problem. And this is one of the hardest problems people that are fighting for truth fall into. We end up fighting against our own because they think that somehow or another we're bashing them by criticizing and critiquing and showing them the error of their ways. That's bashing in modern society. That is how partisans view any kind of deviation from the standard norm that the leaders tell them. So I went ahead and I found a video that I did at the Take Back Democracy March about a year ago. Literally, I think it was almost a year ago to the day. In Washington, D.C., we led a march, and it was really actually wonderful. It was about 5,000 people there, I guess overall, maybe 2,500 literally at the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and at the reflecting pool. But it grew and grew throughout the day, and you saw people following us around. It was pretty fun. A lot of people that you know and love: Lee Camp, Tim Canova, Claudia, Tim Black. There was a host of people: Jeff Day, Nico House, Arn Manconi, and really, really tons of people. Jackie Lukman. Real Progressives worked with the folks from the Real Bernie Sanders Activists page, and it was a lot of fun. But I want to show you my speech at that particular rally to show you me talking to regular people. And you hear the cheers and stuff until people that didn't understand what was going on later decided to fight back. Now, not in this video, but you'll see it throughout. And it's because we tend to just reject things without knowledge. And that puts us in a very, very bad place. So give me 1 second to cue this video up, and I will get us going. And here we go. And I'll pull this over, and I will shrink this out, and I will bring this up. And we're going to go ahead.
They've enabled you to. Remember this, the Republicans spent like drunk whores on the military-industrial complex, and our economy boomed for some. They understood what I'm telling you. It's time for us to flip it around and make it for the 99%. With that. They've been lying to you. And by lying to you, they've enabled you to accept table scraps. They've enabled you to believe that we don't deserve better. They've enabled you to hate your neighbor for things that they've had. And then they've enabled you to be ignorant and fight fights that are absolutely worthless. The reality is they're killing the country. And you've been doing it too, probably, accidentally. But today you've been woken up. Modern monetary theory is not a theory at all. It's a description of how federal financing works since 1971 to present. And it may be the most important thing you'll ever hear out of my mouth. So the lies they're telling you, they're going to rob Granny, they sure as hell are, because they want you desperate. And you're willing to be desperate and stay stuck and marching lines and talking about raising taxes to fight the tax war. And it's time to wise up and call them out and say, hell no! Because the fact of the matter is that our government has chosen to keep us starving and hungry. They've chosen to let each and every one of you go to bed at night thinking that you're going to pass down debt to your grandkids. And they freaking lied to you. And you bought it because they're good liars, aren't they? This is so important. Every one of your issues that you care about, every single one of your issues devolve to an economic component. Every single one of them. You want to stay stuck, or do you want to solve this climate problem? Do you want single payer, or do you want to sit there and bitch and moan about taxes? Think about this, folks. This is the serious thing. Because when you get into the tax fight, you never get to the point. You never, ever, ever talk about health care. It never gets there. Because you're stuck marching in place demanding that your taxes are paying for shit that it ain't paying for. And the reality is, it's stupid. It's dull. You guys need to wake up. You guys need to wake up. Smarten up. We're progressives, for crying out loud. We're not friggin' Democrats. So I'm looking for each and every one of you. The people that dial out, the people that scroll past the economic posts, the people that think I'm a lunatic. I am. That's right. I'm looking for each one of you to get out of your damn comfort zone and learn some flipping economics. Because I need you to wake up. I need an army of millions to get this. I need an army of millions of real progressives to step up and take on the freaking establishment. One of the things that came to Steve Grumbine, who's an economist wannabe, is that when Bernie Sanders came into play, Bernie Sanders came in with a girl named Stephanie Kelton. Stephanie Kelton is a genius. And Stephanie Kelton is the one that put together Bernie Sanders' economic plan. Most of y'all spend all your time fighting with Republicans and conservative Democrats about absolutely nothing. The fact of the matter is, taxes don't fund spending. So every time you think your hard-earned tax dollars at the federal level have gone to Israel, or have gone to fund somebody's Obama phone, or have gone to do any number of things, you've been duped. The fact of the matter is, the United States of America is monetarily sovereign. And that means that we're not broke, because a nation that has debt denominated in its own currency can't go broke. When I found out that Bernie Sanders brought in Stephanie Kelton, I said, I am going to give my everything to this campaign, and I am going to fight for Bernie Sanders. I had a major meltdown, and I let you guys have a glimpse of who I am deep within. You got to see the pain and the suffering that I went through, having realized they stole the election. So when we started Real Progressives, I didn't name them Bernie Real Progressives. I didn't name them Steve's Real Progressives. I named us Real Progressives. And that means that we supported the next progressive in line, Jill Stein. We do not fall prey to the cult of personality. It is a worthless proposition. People die, people go away, people drop the ball, people lie. But principles don't die. And if you believe that it's more important to support a man who is absolutely playing a part in a theatrical role right now, if you believe the guy who sat there and called Hillary Clinton out, if you think he suddenly is a neoliberal, suddenly a war hawk, suddenly doesn't care about single payer, suddenly doesn't care about any of that, you're wrong. But he's no longer running, folks. He's no longer running. Jill Stein is. That's right. That's right. So let's talk about Bernie Sanders for a minute. Bernie Sanders offered up $33 trillion in new spending over 10 years. And you guys thought he was going to tax his way to $33 trillion? Are you flipping kidding me? $33 trillion in new debt? The fact of the matter is Bernie Sanders knew damn well that you guys still think that the federal government is like your household checkbook. And he knew he couldn't blow your mind any further than he did, other than just to say, hey, here's $33 trillion in new spending. I've offered up what they call Pigovian taxes, in other words, behavioral modification taxes, that once they stop the behavior, the revenue shrinks up. And yet you somehow or another had it wrapped where you're passing meme after meme after meme after meme about how, here's how Bernie's paying for it. The fact of the matter is, we're monetarily sovereign, folks. Taxes don't fund spending. This is so important. Every one of your issues that you care about, every single one of your issues devolve to an economic component. Every single one of them. And yet most of you had no idea how to defend Bernie Sanders against Paul Krugman. The loser, Paul Krugman. Paul Krugman is not your hero. Paul Krugman doesn't understand monetary sovereignty. The 99% have paid far too much. You all have paid far too much. But yet you'll go through life marching in place. Taxes fund spending, damn it. And I'm not letting go of it. Damn it, my hard-earned tax dollars. Do you think the Republicans love their kids too? I do. I think the Republicans are just as misguided in their own way as you are in the belief that taxes funded spending. They believe that their hard-earned tax dollars are paying for all you lazy liberals. All you lazy liberals. Smoking weed on the back porch. Drinking a beer. Getting busy with your girl. Doing anything but working hard, you know. But the fact is that they're just as disillusioned and uneducated as many of you, and there's no harm in not knowing. There's only harm in knowing, yet choosing to do nothing about it. You can no longer go through life now saying that your hard-earned tax dollars fund federal spending because you've been told. And if you don't believe me, I assure you, I can cast you aside an entire total library of links to educate yourself, if you so choose to want to learn this, or if you want to stay stuck. Needless to say, I have talked about funding the revolution since day one. And only now are people listening to me. Because here's the deal, Jill Stein has a Green New Deal. That's right. It's just about the same exact deal that Bernie Sanders was putting forth. It's even better. But guess what? You all don't know how to defend her. You don't know how to defend her. So all those bastards in the world are sitting there saying, Jill's crazy. She's a loon. But she's not a loon. She knows you guys don't know. And you don't even know how to defend your heroes. At the end of the day, you're going to hear Hillary Clinton talk about how Bubba balanced the budget. You're going to hear about how Bubba had a surplus. And many of you guys who still bother with Occupy Democrats are foolish, running around bragging about Obama reducing the deficit. And you know what I want to do, of course? I want to drop the freaking elbow of truth on those sons of bitches and tell them taxes don't fund spending. And that surpluses are more money coming out of the economy, not saving money in the piggy bank. There are not old crumpled up dollar bills from Granny from 1919 waiting to fund your Social Security. That's not how it works. We don't borrow US dollars from China. The Clintons are evil. They truly, truly are evil. And it's very, very important that you know why they're evil. It's not just good enough to be angry. It's just not good enough to be angry, folks. You need to destroy these people's sense of self with what they're talking about, because what they're doing is killing people. They are killing people. There is no such thing as a benign vote. You are your vote. You guys need to wake up. You guys need to wake up. Smarten up. We're progressives, for crying out loud. We're not friggin' Democrats. This is so important. Every one of your issues that you care about, every single one of your issues devolve to an economic component. Every single one of them.
So that right there, my friends, was my talk in the nation's capital. For those of you who have not heard that speech before, it may have shocked you. For those of you who have heard speeches similar to that from me, they'll probably keep continuing. But that's the thing, right? Every time we try to get an inch or two further, every single time, we devolve back to old thinking, and we try to fight old wars that we have long since have no longer been of any value to us whatsoever. The idea of fighting to raise taxes to pay for these great plans, it's just not going to happen. And I want to talk about something else really important too. The idea of cutting military spending. It sounds great. It really does, because none of us want our country to be the warmonger that it is. We don't want to be the world's military police. We don't want to be the ones going around bombing everyone, right? And so what happens? Needless to say, people fill in the gap. They create stories to explain away things. But the reality is, if we cut military spending, then we will go into a recession. The concern must be not to cut spending, but to shift that spending to the public purpose, whether it be infrastructure, whether it be for Medicare for all, whether it be for something else. The idea of cutting spending is not a good thing. We have to offset what is called demand leakages. Demand leakages are a simple concept. Let's talk about it real quick. Whenever you and I save money and we put it in a bank, that's a demand leakage. Whenever someone buys a CD or a savings bond, that's a demand leakage. Whenever someone goes ahead and buys a foreign product or service and the money leaves the country, that is a demand leakage. Anytime someone stashes their money offshore, that is a demand leakage. Anytime money is not being spent, it is being saved and hoarded, is a demand leakage. Okay? So we have two things that we can do. A, we can chase rich people around trying to get their money away from them. Or B, we can spend money on the 99%. Taking money away from the rich, while it certainly helps with income inequality, doesn't pay for any programs whatsoever. Those dollars are literally deleted and removed from the economy. So the real value here is learning to spend on the people. For far too long, all of our spending has gone directly towards the military-industrial complex. All of our spending has gone to paying for things that don't have anything to do with regular people. They've bailed out industries. They've bailed out people. They've literally spent money on anything but you and I. And so what we've been striving to do is to explain that if you want to fight for taxation, if that's your big thing, if you can't, that's all you care about, make sure that you understand why you're fighting for it. Because taxes really do not fund spending. In other words, the dollars that are brought in are not repurposed and spent on the people. That's not how this works. They don't take money for the rich and then spend it on the poor. That's not how it works. Those dollars come in and they're deleted from the system. If we delete too many from the system and we don't spend more, then we get into a recession. That's what happened with Bill Clinton. They cut too close to the bone with welfare reform. They cut too close to the bone with their making government efficient thing, right? All these little games they played to reduce spending. And then they removed Glass-Steagall and allowed the financial industries to go crazy. So that put us all into private debt, which then in turn was another situation where we lacked any ability to absorb shocks to the economy. And many of us, myself included, went down in flames during that time. So we have a situation where if you want not just like a fight for 15, I mean, when you say fight for 15, it's real easy to think that you're just forcing employers to pay $15 an hour. But what if we set a federal job guarantee? Think about where I'm going with this. What if we set a federal job guarantee with a living wage, maybe at $15 an hour, maybe at $20 an hour? But with that job guarantee, we also provided a full suite of benefits from Medicare to paid family and medical leave, every holiday off, whatever, so many weeks of vacation, et cetera, et cetera. And that right there was the new benchmark for the minimum that you can pay somebody in this country. Now, every business in America has to meet or beat that level and that benefit. In order to get somebody off of the federal job guarantee, these businesses would then in turn have to not only meet these basic things, but they would have to sweeten the pot to pull people out of the federal job guarantee. That's how you make real change. Unfortunately, people read the science blogs and they say, oh, automation is coming and it's going to render work irrelevant, right? It depends on what you call work. You know, everybody points to the Star Trek culture, yet I think Captain Kirk woke up for work every day. I think Scotty still woke up from work every day. I think Spock still showed up to work, and Uhura and all the rest of them. They all showed up for work because there will be work even in a future modern society. It's just different work. So all the things that we have let go because it wasn't profitable to the man, those are things that a local, community organized, federal job guarantee, federally funded job guarantee can address to enhance our society, to change the focus from profits to serving each other, to serving the common man. But every time we bring this up, people reflexively ignore that we just said we're redefining work, but the robots. We said we're redefining work, but the robots. Snapper, listen, we're redefining work, but what about the robots? Screw the robots, we're redefining work. Did you hear me, yes or no? But what about the robots? We are redefining work. We have so many bridges, for example, in this country, having nothing to do with the federal job guarantee. So many bridges in this country that are failing, that are take your life into your own hands kind of bad shape. And the state governments are totally broke. They can barely afford to fix any of them. They don't have nearly enough funds to fix these bridges. Why is that? Because we've allowed the federal government to reduce spending, to reduce funding to these states. So all of a sudden, look at all those blue-collar jobs for repairing bridges that suddenly open up if the federal government sends block grants to every state to address and pay for every one of those bridge repairs. Now, what about if we do Medicare for all? Everybody suddenly has full access to all these services they didn't have before. Now what's going to happen? Look at all the jobs in the medical community that will come up from blue-collar work, maybe orderlies, people working in the stockyard or shipping yard, whatever, to the doctors and the nurses and the specialty services, et cetera, and then the equipment and the buildings and everything else goes into it. It's got nothing to do with automation. We got tons of work that's not being done right now because we've created a false scarcity. But when we talk to people about these things, they don't listen. They fall back to, what about hyperinflation? What did I just say that would in any way, shape, or form give you an idea that there would be a hyperinflation? We've got the resources. They're not being utilized. The fake scarcity is pieces of paper. If you think the government's doing a great job already, then you're not going to worry about them paying more money into the economy to provide these services. But if you're like me and you realize the government's screwing us, the Congress is screwing us, then you sit there and you realize that in order for Congress, who has the power of the purse, we make Congress spend on the 99%. But why would somebody say hyperinflation? What kind of mindset says that when the government always is the creator of the dollar? It is the owner of the dollar. It is the one that wrote it into existence. It's a law. So why would somebody say if the government, they're just printing money? No, they're not printing money. We've said this before. Let's see if this works for you. Let's see if you can understand this. When the government spends money, it doesn't just create random money and sit it over here in a corner. That's not how it works. When the government writes a law or a bill or appropriates money, it sends instructions. Those instructions are then read by someone at the Fed who says, Congress wrote another law. Let's keystroke these dollars into the Treasury's account. And then the Treasury will then send checks to whatever agencies, whatever vendors and contractors, etc., have provided the government goods and services. So we provide the government goods and services. The government, in turn, provides us paper dollars to pay our taxes with. That's the exchange. So there is no government just prints money. Government spends money as it needs to spend money. And as it brings dollars back, it taxes them and they delete them. So this completes a circuit. It's real simple. Think about this. The birth of the dollar is congressional spending. The death of a dollar is a tax. It's the perfect method to keep the economy going. Taxes drive the need for the dollar. If you don't have the dollar, you can't pay your taxes. So we absolutely have to do something to get a hold of paper dollars, to get a hold of digital dollars, to get a hold of dollars, period, so that we can pay our taxes. That's the thing that gives them value. It's not the oil dollar, the petrodollar, all that stuff that you hear so many people say. They're always looking for a commodity to tie this stuff to, but that's not what it's tied to. All fiat currencies, free-floating sovereign fiat currencies, they're backed by taxes or some other obligation that forces your need for that currency. This is really simple, but you've just got a lot of bad programming in your head that makes you reject this knowledge. It's not hard. It really isn't. The government is not broke. Think about this. The creator of the dollar that issues these credits says, God, we're going to run out of keystrokes if we don't get more tax dollars. What are we going to do? So let's flash forward to something else that I think that is really important too. And this is the idea of the Federal Reserve. You know, for a long time, for 40 plus years, we have suffered under what we call neoliberalism. For 40 years, we have suffered the idea of getting rid of public space in favor of privatization. We have fought and lost over and over again for public goods and services, all pushed to the makers and takers model of Ayn Rand and the neoliberal belief system. So what has happened? When I told you that Congress sends instructions to the Fed in turn keystrokes those into the Treasury's accounts, the Treasury then spends. What we've done is we've said, Congress, we're going to reduce the amount you spend, and that only leaves one option for the economy to win, and that is private credit. So banks then keystroke IOUs into existence. They don't create money per se, but they create bank-denoted IOUs in the government's account, the government's unit of account. And they pick people that are credit-worthy and not credit-worthy. Banks make their money on the interest that we pay them. When that loan is paid off, it zeroes out. The reason why there's so much bank money in existence today is because neoliberalism stopped Congress from writing these checks and putting money out there. That's why when Obama said we have to eat our peas, thinking people knew immediately that Obama was lying. Obama is a neoliberal. Okay? When Hillary talked to Bernie and laughed in that cackling voice, you know, Bernie Sanders had this great plan. Well, what did Hillary do? How are you going to pay for it? The same way we pay for everything with keystrokes, right? But for the last 40 years, we've been led to believe that the government is broke. For the last 40 years, we've watched income inequality go crazy. Why is that? Because by cutting off the spigot at Congress and pushing us to private debt, it's a way for mass extraction of wealth in the country to the top 1%, because you and I have to financialize our existence. We have to financialize our existence. There is no more pay increases. There is no more benefit increases. We have to go to a bank. We have to get a credit card. We have to do something like that to fatten up the credit companies, to fatten up the payday lenders, to fatten up Wall Street. Okay? So MMT describes a way out of that. It describes the way to kill neoliberalism. But people don't listen because they have their own beliefs that they've held for 40 years, and they've created narratives to explain away all this pain, to explain away 40 years of pain that we've suffered through. And because they don't know economics, naturally the answers aren't economically based. They're fictionally based. They're based on tales from the tablecloth. Okay? And it's like caveman writing hieroglyphics, explaining why that big orange thing goes up in the sky. Okay? Explaining why the rain came down. You know, they got all these myths and rituals to explain the shape of the earth. Because they didn't know any better. They weren't scientists. They were just people trying to make heads or tails of circumstances that they're experiencing. And then you get the media filling your head full of nonsense, trying to make it seem like the government's going to go broke, or it's going to go bankrupt. How in the world are they going to ever be able to afford this? You know, there's video clips of Cenk Unger talking about how we've got to close the deficit. Oh, my God. And we've got them all talking about being a moral hazard. The deficit is our private savings. Remember going way back when I talked about demand leakages? If we reduce spending, we reduce our paychecks. We reduce our ability to have money. We do. That's us. The government neither has money nor doesn't have money. It creates it with keystrokes. So when we go into these arguments fighting about taxation, taxes are very important. They're extremely important. They're the tool that gives our dollar its value. But we're way overtaxed right now for the level of services we're getting. We're way overtaxed. In fact, let me tell you another secret. Social Security. You know, we track Social Security payments in some spreadsheet somewhere. For all we know, it might be Excel. It might be some database like DB2 or, you know, Oracle or any number of, these things. But the reality is, your taxes aren't actually paying for anything. They're keystroke. So all Social Security checks, appropriated, those things are authorized to go out. They're just taking our money out of the economy. That gives us the feeling like we actually paid into it. But the reality is it's just another monetary tool to keep the economy from going into an inflationary period. So they extract money from us unnecessarily. Just like when we sell bonds, all that is taking existing dollars and pulling them out of the economy for inflation purposes. We spend money, so they say you got to sell bonds to offset new spending. So that takes existing dollars out of the economy. But in reality, what are those? All those dollars that are in treasury bonds and savings bonds and stuff like that, they're existing dollars that somebody used. Even when China buys treasuries, they're using their own US dollar holdings to buy those treasuries. So it's not like we're borrowing money. Do you understand? We're just taking money out of the economy. It's a monetary tool, and it doesn't work very well, right? It barely makes a bleep. The real thing, you want to see our economy take off, it requires fiscal policy, aka Congress, to spend on us. So how about the same things a few more times? Okay. Anyway, if we look at this for our own purposes as we go into this season where they're fighting with Donald Trump and stuff like that, you're going to see people talk about Kansas. You're going to see people talk about how Kansas, cut taxes on the wealthy and so forth and bankrupted the state. It's very true. Kansas is a case in point of the race to the bottom at the state level. Kansas is not a monetary sovereign. It is a currency user. So when you cut the revenue stream for the state by reducing taxes, you naturally have to offset that by cutting programs, vital programs. Now, if the federal government was doing its job and spending money, all of the states would be fine. We could get rid of any possible way of unfunded mandates from the federal government and make every one of those states solvent so that they could serve their people. But instead, That's not what we're doing. That's not what we're seeing. And you're watching people talking about how Donald Trump is going to bankrupt the government. Donald Trump is a bozo. He's an awful human being. And there's many things about Donald Trump that are terrible and awful. And his tax plan is bad, but not because it's going to bankrupt the nation. It's bad because it's going to exacerbate income inequality. It's bad because it gives the fat cats more money to buy our government with, more money to not worry about what happens with us. But it doesn't bankrupt the country. So as Dr. Kelton often says, let's make the rich irrelevant and save the 99% and the planet without even bothering the rich. Don't even worry about them. Let's focus on making sure we are whole. Let's make sure that we are taken care of. So when you look and you watch Democrats, they're not telling you this. Why is that? Because none of their leaders are willing to say it because they're afraid. You look over at Greens, they're not saying it. Why? Because they don't know. They don't know, sadly. They don't understand. They just know they're regular people and they don't want things to be the way they are. But they don't understand. And you look at Republicans, quite frankly, they're just as misled as all of us too, right? So really what it does is it comes down to us making a change, us demanding a change, and having the knowledge to back up that change, okay? United States government creates its own money. United States government spends that money into existence. When the United States government doesn't spend that money, the economy requires something. It either has to be a net importer or exporter, should I say, where money comes in, or we go into private debt. This is called sectoral balances, public, private, rest of world. And when you look, the spigots pouring money into our economic bathtub are either public money, which is not debt at all, private debt, which is credit cards and student debt and all these medical bills and stuff that we incur, or it is money coming in from other countries because we are a net exporter. We don't really have a lot of choices on the net exporter side. And the good news is that capitalism demands a race to the bottom. So all of a sudden we have to cut costs to be competitive in the rest of world net importer, net exporter thing. That's the problem with that. So if we focus instead on the public spending to fill the bathtub, to offset the leakages from both the private debt and the rest of world net importer exporter thing, that's how we win. I hope this makes sense. I hope this is something that you can understand. You know, I saw somebody in the comments, and I'm not even angry. I can't even be angry. They're not doing anything useful to help America, but they want to poke holes and say, oh, you're saying the same thing. Well, folks, I do this day in, day out, and I see people that don't know this day in, day out. So I'm forced to say it day in, day out. And I keep saying it day in and day out because I'm an activist, I'm a revolutionary, and I'm trying to save your kids' lives, even if you don't love them enough to do the same thing. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at this, okay? We are stuck in a situation where our religious beliefs of economics, our religious beliefs of the way taxes flow and the way that Party A acts and the way Party B acts, those religious beliefs have no basis in fact. They're not how we get things done. And they're not going to help us in the future if we don't change the narrative from the bottom up. Those parties have got to start speaking truth. And they're not going to speak truth if the regular voters continue to demand really, really, really economically incorrect demands. It's just that simple. There's 350 million people in America. I've got 48 people watching. How many more times do you think I need to say this to reach 350 million Americans? 48 people right now. Sometimes it goes over 100, 150 people watching live. Sometimes we get 20,000 people that have watched a video, 100,000 people that have watched a video. But how many more times, even with 100,000 people watching a video, do we got to do it to get 350 million people to understand? Think about that. I feel really bad for the guy that felt like he had a comment to make about just saying it over and over again. He obviously is not really fighting for anything of substance, and there's many people like him. Probably go on his timeline, see a bunch of Trump sucking a baby bottle or something like that, some real cool revolutionary post. But that's what we're straddled with, folks. I'm not joking. That is largely what we're left with as a movement to make these changes. If you look at it through that lens, this feels really hopeless, doesn't it? It feels really, really hopeless. But if you choose to ignore people like that and focus instead on reaching the people that really want to make change, instead of focusing on them, focus on those who really want to make change but maybe just don't understand. That's how we win. And it requires not just me telling it, but it requires you telling it. And then it requires your friends telling it, and so on. And that's how we build a movement. That's how we do it. As we head into 2018, many of these candidates are going to say incredibly economically inept comments. They're going to make many economically inept promises. And they're going to ineptly do nothing when they get elected because they can't. It's not like an opinion thing here. This is the stuff that is very, very serious. And as long as the new blood is saying the same things that the old blood said, we're going to get the same results. It's the very definition of insanity. It's the very definition of insanity. So I want to talk about inflation real quickly, because inflation is always something that comes up. You know, people point to Weimar Republic. They point to Zimbabwe and Venezuela. These three things come up over and over and over again. What are you going to do? Just print more money. And, you know, I had Max Sejo come on the other day who did a great discussion on hyperinflations and Weimar Republic. But I want to repeat it in a short version. Hyperinflations don't come from printing money. Hyperinflations come from an inability to meet demand, an inability for production to meet demand, and from political unrest. In Germany, the Weimar Republic came out of the Treaty of Versailles. Those folks were devastated, absolutely devastated by World War I and the Treaty of Versailles. Their war reparations were put in a foreign currency, a French franc. That foreign currency is not payable in Reichsmarks, which is what the German people used in the Weimar Republic. So their burdens were taken, their steel, their gold, their natural resources were plundered to pay foreign debt. So naturally, you could give them 1 million barrels of Reichsmarks, but they didn't have enough to buy a loaf of bread. It wasn't printing money that caused the problem, although that did, make it obvious. It was that their entire productive capacity had been blown away by the war, blown away by the Treaty of Versailles, and blown away by the extremely punitive nature that destroyed the will of the people in that country as well. People were destitute, but it didn't have anything to do with printing money. Do you understand this? Let's go to Zimbabwe, favorite number 2. Zimbabwe was, in a civil war. Mugabe took the farmland from the white farmers and gave it to the black freedom fighters. Those black freedom fighters were not farmers, had no experience farming. And the farm production dropped some 60%. They didn't have nearly enough food to go around. And they were not a nation with a robust industry. They didn't have many manufacturing plants. They didn't have production there. So naturally, when you have no production to meet demand, people are going to bid up the price of things, and eventually the money is useless. Another hyperinflation based on political unrest, just like Weimar. And then you go to Venezuela. Venezuela's got one export that everything hinges on, and that is oil. They also pegged their currency to the US dollar, just like as if they were on the gold standard. They had lost all their policy space pegging it to the US dollar. So they've got political unrest, very, very few industries worthy of being able to take care of the nation. One particular industry that is subject to ebbs and flows within the rest of the petro world. And you've got a situation where they have a hyperinflation going on as well. This is not the same thing as a regular inflation. The US government will not have a hyperinflation. We have way too many industries. We have way too many resources. We have way too much ingenuity, and it's got nothing to do with American exceptionalism. This is just the truth. So why will people, even after I do this presentation, come back and say, what are you going to do? Just print more money? What are you going to do? A hyperinflation? Wait, they're going to do this over and over and over again. And I'll have to do this same presentation over and over and over again to counteract the economic illiteracy peddled by many in our movement and the right wing. We are not candidates for a hyperinflation. Now, let's say regular inflation. All of a sudden, we write a bill or a law. And Stephanie Kelton had talked about in her We Can Give Everyone a Pony If We Breed Enough Ponies article that she put in the LA Times. What she was saying is, as long as there is enough real resources, we can give everyone in America a pony. I mean, that was her analogy in this case. It's the same thing with healthcare. It's the same thing with education. As long as we have enough schools and teachers and computers, etc., we can provide everyone with free college. As long as there is enough hospitals, nurses, doctors, gurneys, x-ray machines, etc., then we can provide everyone with health care. Do you see what I'm saying? It's not about the paper. It shouldn't be about the paper, but because these same people that talk about what are you going to do, print more money, those people, the government says, oh yeah, about that printing money thing. But where did that come from? It comes from the gold standard era, pre-1971, pre-Bretton Woods Accord ending. You had a finite pool of gold, and this finite pool of gold backed our currency. So when you printed more money, you had a finite pool of gold. It's like a pizza pie. Instead of cutting it in 8 slices, you now cut it in 12 slices. Instead of cutting in 12 slices, you now cut it in 16 slices, and then 32 slices, and then 64 slices, and so on and so forth. That's that whole devaluing the currency, etc. But when you're on a free-floating fiat regime, in other words, it's not pegged to the price of gold, it's not pegged to someone else's currency, it's not pegged to cotton or chicken necks or frog legs or anything else. It rises and falls like this, like no problem. The government is the price setter. It's the monopoly currency issuer, and it is the one that says that $1 will come back and equal $1 in taxes paid. That is how they control the value of the dollar. Real resources, access to real resources, not the number of pieces of paper. Inflation is too many pieces of paper chasing too few goods and services. So what happens when you have demand? When you have people that need to get their teeth fixed, and when you have people that need heart surgery, and you have people that need to get whatever, normally industry picks up the pace. Now all of a sudden, flash back to my job guarantee discussion, and everybody's got more money in their pockets now. All of a sudden, industry starts booming. It doesn't cause inflation. It might cause momentary inflation to catch up to the demand. but it won't cause a hyperinflation. They'll just ramp up production and they'll hire more people into these better jobs out of the job guarantee. People will be making more money. They'll be living better and they won't be able to stick it to us. If your boss says, if you don't do this, I'll fire you. It's like, okay, that's fine. I'll go to the job guarantee. If you're living in Flint, Michigan, and they won't fix your water pipes, you say, that's fine. I have a job in Denver. I'm going to Denver where the water is clean. You have a job the next day. That's freedom. And it's not a job working for the man, digging holes, make work, whatever. It's jobs that the local community has deemed valuable that they need done. This is really critical. And this is all very important for all of us to understand. Now let's talk about green energy for a minute. There is a million different ways to get green energy across America. We could subsidize every single house having access to solar panels like that. We could subsidize to get the lobbyists to shut up and leave us alone. We could even subsidize temporarily so that we don't have to die. We could subsidize their business efforts for a few years until they shift to green energy so that they're not losing their investment, whatever. It doesn't cost us money that's keystroked into existence to keep those families that work at those businesses employed. But we make it so that they do the things that we want to do to serve the public purpose. If you don't want smokestacks across America destroying the environment, then you find ways to subsidize replacing all of them. That money that is broken into existence by Congress may help that business survive as it transitions to green energy. However, our planet survives, and once we're green across the board, the cost of production drops dramatically. The cost of pollution drops dramatically, and pollution is the #1 killer. So what does that do to our need for healthcare also? It reduces that as well. Shifting to sustainable energy will dramatically reduce the costs of production. But we as a nation don't need to tax to pay for that. This is a decision our government can make so that we all live and our planet stays inhabitable. So it's habitable, right? We can live in it and breathe clean air and drink clean water. And the businesses stay whole so they're not blocking life-saving initiatives. I often question how much the left really wants to see these green initiatives when I see how hard they push back against making them happen. Because after all, they've got to win and win big. They can't just have the thing they need. They've got to exact the price over here because they don't know any better. So we're offering up solutions that win and win big. Get rid of fracking because fracking poisons water. Fracking destroys environments. Kills animals, kills wildlife, kills all that is around it. But it's only there because we don't subsidize green energy. We subsidize gas production, fossil fuel production. We subsidize that. Why are we not saying, hey, let's shift to this? Let's demand a shift to this. Now, people always want to talk about taxing businesses, taxing corporations, taxing this, taxing that. Again, I told you taxes are very important. They're what gives our currency its value. But what if I told you that instead of taxing income, we taxed behavior? What if I told you that rather than trying to get revenue from taxation, we made it more about corporate citizenship? What if we rewarded good corporate citizenship for serving the people and serving the environment instead of just randomly and wantonly taxing income? What if instead we passed on the income tax to the CEOs directly, as opposed to the corporation, as long as the corporation acts in the benefit of the people, the public purpose. Why not tax the wealth of that CEO instead of letting him make $60 million a year? Why not tax that at a high rate? So we're trying to tax to spend, and that's not how it works. We need to tax for income inequality. We need a tax to drive the currency. We need a tax to change behaviors. But we don't need a tax so that we have money to spend. So in order of operations, I would say it quickly, we need to spend on green energy. We need to spend on healthcare. We need to spend on college. We need to spend on infrastructure. We need to spend on a federal job guarantee to anchor the economy. You see what I mean? And then, after all that, then I say we need to tax, because taxes don't fund spending. This is simple. I hope I made this easy to understand. I tried my best to keep it emotion-free so I wasn't ranting or raving, because some people get the feels. Just try to say it straight, just like I'm talking to a child, just like I'm talking to my wife, just like I'm talking to my mother, my father, if you were around. These are the conversations we need to be having with each other. But instead, we allow them, the party people, because it serves them as a party, to talk about taxes and look what the taxpayer dollar did. Well, it's not taxpayer dollars at all, is it? It's the public money. It's the national money. It's our national treasures. It's our access to provisioning our own government, to making it so that we have roads and stuff. But it is in no way, shape, or form tied to our taxes, because our taxes are literally deleted. We could expand Social Security and we could get rid of FICA taxes altogether. Instead of raising the cap, we could eliminate the cap. We could eliminate the tax, and we could just provide folks with Social Security, and we could expand it. It could act as a kind of complementary basic income to those who do not qualify or want to do a voluntary federal job guarantee, or who are not working in the public sector. I mean, this is pretty simple stuff here. But folks would rather fight tax wars than win. And we're here to help you win, because we need to win, because we have kids of our own. We have desires to win. I hope that you learned something today. I'll probably do more of these in the future. It's very, very hard to hit the right tone to make everybody happy. There's always somebody going to troll the thread. I can't help that as much as I'd like to. There's always going to be somebody who doesn't understand and says that we're wrong or that we're lying. We're not, I assure you. And there's always going to be someone who just doesn't like the way my eyebrows are, or the fact that one of my teeth is shorter than the other, something, right? There's always going to be some issue. But for those of you who really want to save lives and save the planet and help make this revolution actually come to be, focus on the information, learn, and take this information beyond, and try to help us win. I'm Steve Grumbine with Real Progressives. Have a great day, everybody.